Good morning. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the 2023 Rear Admiral Grace Hopper Award Ceremony. Today, on International Women's Day, during Women's History Month, we are celebrating the achievements of Michele Markoff of the U.S. Department of State. I am a student at CIC, and like our awardee, I'm an employee of the U.S. Department of State. I also had the honor of supporting her nomination today, so it's truly a pleasure to see that come to fruition. Before we get going, I have 3 administrative remarks. First, another reminder to please turn off your cell phones and silence your devices. Second, we want to thank all of those behind the scenes who have helped put an effort to make this event today happen so successfully. This includes the staff of CIC and National Defense University, and the NDU Foundation, and the other members of the award selection committee, which was led by CIC faculty member Linda Jansen. And third, let me go over the sequence of events for this morning. First, we will have Lieutenant General Michael Plain, President of National Defense University, provide welcoming remarks. Then we will have the Chancellor of the College of Information and Cyberspace, Dr. Cassandra Lewis, who's going to tell us about the award and why it matters. Then she will present the Hopper Award to Ms. Markoff, at which point the nominee will have the floor to share her insights with all of us. In a Q&A session following her talk, please remember to be respectful of everyone's time and keep your questions brief. We will conclude at 11:15. You're more than welcome to stay afterwards and mingle until around 11:45. Now, with all of those items covered, I'd like to introduce your 17th President of National Defense University, Lieutenant Michael Plain. Sir, the floor is yours.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Becca, for that excellent recap for all of us so we know what to expect this morning. This is a very special event today as we honor Michele Markoff with the 3rd ever Admiral Grace Hopper Award for our 2023 recipient of the College of Information and Cyberspace's prestigious Admiral Grace Hopper Award. As you know, the work we do here at National Defense University is key to educating those who will ensure the security of our nation and of our partner and allied nations as well. Today's news headlines continue to focus, rightly so, on the conflict in Ukraine and competition with China. But along with those challenges, we also hear dire warnings to prepare the nation and the nation's government agencies, utilities, banks, businesses, and schools for cyber attack. Ensuring we have leaders across the national security community who understand the cyber and information domain is absolutely vital. This domain is unique not only in the speed with which attacks happen, but also in its breathtaking scope. This domain touches every single part of our lives, ladies and gentlemen, around the globe and even into space. It is undeniable that the elements of cyber and information are now inextricably woven through the fabric of our lives and of our societies, and much of that can be affected through the cyber realm. This ubiquity is really a key reason that cyber affairs have a truly growing role in diplomacy. That is one reason why it is so appropriate that this year's recipient has a deep background in international affairs and diplomacy, as well as having served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for International Cyberspace Security. I mentioned the importance of cyber and the information domain to national and, quite frankly, global security. That's why we have an entire college dedicated to the study of cyberspace and information and dedicated to educating national security professionals so that they are ready to lead military and interagency programs and operations in this critical domain. That's also why our College of Information and Cyberspace offers cyber and information electives to students across all of NDU. Some of our students will lead cyber programs, but all of our graduates must understand the domain and how to best incorporate cyber and information considerations into their strategic approach to the global security environment. I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit here because I know we're all eager to get to Dr. Lewis and then to Ms. Markoff's award presentation. So I would note also that the month of March, we're celebrating the contributions that women have made to America and across the world. It's fitting that the Admiral Grace Hopper Award is presented during Women's History Month. Admiral Hopper was an important pioneer in computing and in national security education, having taught in this very institution. She also was a role model for countless women who followed her example of military service to the nation. Finally, I want to publicly thank Chancellor Lewis for modeling how to develop a strong, diverse, inclusive team that sets conditions for every member to maximize their contribution to our vital mission. Chancellor Lewis, thank you for creating and championing this important award program. So thank you all for joining us today as we present the 2023 Admiral Grace Hopper Award to an NDU alumna who epitomizes our mission of developing national security leaders who can think critically and inform national security strategy under conditions of disruptive change at the very highest levels of not only our government, but of our partners and allies as well. Ms. Michele Markoff is one of those rare leaders who understands the art of diplomacy, the hard power of military operations, and the technology underpinning the cyber and information domain. Congratulations again, Ms. Markoff.
Good morning. It is my pleasure to be here today. It truly is. I look out across the audience and I see friends from across NDU. I see faculty and staff. I see colleagues. Chris Inglis, recognizing you. First Secretary Crown, thank you all for joining us here today on this very, very, very special occasion. Thank you, Becca, for keeping us in line and laying down the law in terms of what we will follow to make this truly a special event. I want to thank Lieutenant General Plain, who opened for us. I believe, sir, that the Grace Hopper Award was one of the first events that you attended when you joined us here at NDU. And so I just want to thank you for your unwavering support of CIC and this award. Way in the back, I see James Schmeling back there, the president of the NDU Foundation. James, thank you for your support of this award and your support of the many initiatives that CIC endeavors to produce for our community. So thank you. I already went ahead and introduced and recognized some of our special guests, and they are here, and we're all here to celebrate a very special leader in our field. So I want to thank Ms. Michele Markoff for joining us today, and thank you for your years of dedication to this field. And I'll get a little bit more into why we're honoring you in just a bit, but let me first turn my attention to thanking some additional individuals. I want to recognize, as was said before, Professor Linda Jansen and her team. Professor Jansen chaired the committee for the Grace Hopper Award, and we thank her as well as the efforts of the CIC faculty and staff who are a part of this committee to select today's honoree. This gathering represents a subset of the dedicated faculty and staff and students of the National Defense University College of Information and Cyberspace, many of whom are spread all across the national security enterprise and the world. We also want to recognize that in the house today is two of our full-time program cohorts, our Joint Professional Military Education Program and our Chief Information Officer Leadership Development Program. CIC fills an exceptionally unique role to educate the joint warfighter, national security leaders, and the cyber workforce to lead and advance national and global security. Our unique focus on the information environment and the cyberspace domain necessitates that we not only educate the forward thinkers of today, but to create a positive environment for the forward thinkers of tomorrow. This was the idea that propelled us forward when we first envisioned the Grace Hopper Award. Grace Hopper, as you just heard, was a faculty member in the early days of our college when we were called the Department of Defense Computer Institute. Some of you may even remember DOTC. Much has changed since those days, but I am proud to say that the legacy and excellence and innovation found in Grace Hopper is still resident in our college. Admiral Hopper personifies everything that we hope to honor with this award, and you'll hear that a bit about our honoree. She was monumental in her field. She dedicated her life to service and continues to inspire the national security and computing fields through her legacy. Recognizing those that follow in her footsteps and continuing to forge their own paths is essential to not only honoring Admiral Hopper's impact, but continuing her work. Fundamentally, our work aims to secure the peace and prosperity of our society. To do so, we must not only inspire future generations to pursue education and careers in cyber, technology, information, diplomacy, national security, on and on and on, all these really diverse areas, and pursue them to not only pursue these careers, but also to ascend critical mantles of leadership at all levels. Enriching diverse talent pools within our community is bedrock to this effort. And that's what brings us here today. To do this work, we recognize and promote excellence and achievements, and we also recognize that diversity and inclusion are force multipliers for creative ideas, alternative perspectives, and innovative ways for responding to and solving intractable problems. To respond and thwart these threats, we are committed to developing leaders, critical thinkers, and creating the strongest and most resilient national security workforce for the sake of global peace. This year's recipient of the Rear Admiral Grace Hopper Award is none other, as you've heard, Ms. Michele Markoff. For decades, she has served as the senior State Department subject matter expert overseeing the development and implementation of foreign policy initiatives on cyberspace issues. She served as the Deputy Coordinator for Cyber Issues in the Office of the Coordinator for Cyber Affairs, and most recently served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for International Cyberspace Security in the new Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy. She's now back with us at NDU, and she'll be joining for a short time, however long she clears to stay. Hopefully it's a little bit longer. She'll be joining the faculty at National War College. But there's something about Ms. Markoff that you may not know, which is not part of her formal bio, is that for years she has really served CIC in a really instrumental way. She has been a curriculum expert, helping us to develop content in our Master of Science program, developing and helping with lessons in our International Perspectives on Cyberspace course. So in addition to receiving the 2023 Rear Admiral Grace Hopper Award, I am also really proud and really excited to announce her as CIC's inaugural Distinguished Scholar. So thank you for that. Let me conclude by again expressing to Michele how honored we are today to have her. We are appreciative of your work, your lifelong work in pursuing our nation's interests through cyber diplomacy, and what you continue to do to inspire those all around us, particularly the next generation of national security leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I present to you our honoree, and at this time, Michele, if you can join me center stage to receive the award, and I'll also invite Lieutenant General Plain to also join us in the center. Thank you.
I thought I was going to laugh, but now I think I'm going to cry. Well, the first thing I want to do is express to everyone who has had anything to do with my being given this wonderful award my profound gratitude for your consideration. I can't imagine anything more satisfying than being appreciated for doing something you've devoted your career to. And for me, that's been trying to reduce risk to the national security of the United States through diplomacy. I also want to thank those friends and colleagues who are joining me here today. They're my colleagues from the State Department, some of which I've worked with for over a decade, and I've traveled with and had many great experiences. I want to thank you, Chris, for being here. I am honored that you would make time to do this. Jim Lewis, wherever you flew, back there. Okay, I want to thank you as well for taking time. And Bryony Crown for representing the UK government, who thought me important enough to send somebody here. I am very much gratified. In fact, the meme that's been running around my head when I was notified I was getting this award will date me and maybe date some of you as well, which is what the actress Sally Field said when she, the much derided lead of the silly 1960s sitcom called The Flying Nun, won the Best Actress Oscar for Places in the Heart when she famously exclaimed, "You like me. Right now, you really like me." The other part of this award, the commitment to inclusion, also provoked another meme, which reflects my not-so-easy pioneering role as a female in the two fields that I've worked in, nuclear arms control and international cyber diplomacy. Here, I will quote Kermit. "It isn't easy being green." Frankly, like many women here, I'm sure, just striving to be accepted in your chosen field is a campaign for inclusivity and refusing to be marginalized. So how can you not be inclusive when you have the opportunity to lead? And I'm proud to say that I have had the opportunity to put others in leadership positions, most recently in organizing part of the new State Cyber Bureau, and the women who universally rose to the top because of extraordinary talent and hard work, which should be the sole determinant of merit. So the question I often get is, how did I end up doing what I've been doing and why? And somewhat tongue-in-cheek, I would argue that a career in political military matters for me was not optional. I descend from an ancient Russian family with military and diplomatic roots. Notable ancestors include Michele Markoff, a Lithuanian knight who accompanied Rurik in 811 AD to found Kievan Rus. Another was a vassal knight to Ivan the Terrible, the Tsar who apparently deeded our family all our family lands, in Ukraine, by the way. A more infamous relative was ambassador to France at the time of Talleyrand, and Russian historian Karamzin called him the single most inept ambassador Russia ever had, one who single-handedly precipitated the war between France and Russia. Y is X-rated, but if you want to know, I'll tell you later. Another great uncle was Chief Justice in Kerensky's short-lived government. And my paternal great-grandmother's brother was Admiral of the Black Sea Fleet School at the time of the 1917 revolution, and there's a really good story there, too. So my father was born there in the Crimea near Yalta in 1921, directly following the defeat of Wrangel and the White Russian cavalry who were pushed into the Black Sea and evacuated by the British. His father died there, and his uncle imprisoned in Turkey while trying to escape. To make a harrowing story short, my grandmother was imprisoned and sentenced to be shot, but escaped with my father to Harbin, Manchuria, where her grandfather had established industrial mills at the turn of the century. My father grew up a stateless person going to a Russian Imperial Military Academy under the Japanese occupation of Manchuria. In 1939, they fled from the Chinese communists to California, where my father ended up at UC Berkeley in Slavic languages and engineering, not speaking a word of English. As soon as he could, he was commissioned into the Army Air Corps Counterintelligence Corps at Fort Meade. He was in London during the Blitz and was one of the first in occupied Ansbach interrogating German scientists. After the war ended, he helped to found the Slavic and Oriental Languages Division at the Monterey Army Language School, wrote the first Russian handbook, and taught Russian to some folks I had the pleasure of working with some 30 years later. He was commissioned again during Korea and was a psych warfare officer doing counter-Soviet action at Mountain Home Air Force Base, joining a wild group of aristocratic Russian emigres. So the bottom line is I was born to this career in Letterman Army Hospital in the Presidio in San Francisco. I was a Cold War American baby with a family history in Russia and China, puzzling between nuclear war drills and my father teaching me how Alexander Nevsky ran the Germans off the ice. I wanted to find out how I could bring my unique skills to bear to help resolve the antipathies between the US, Russia, and China in order to keep the peace, and most importantly, to keep America safe. And I was single-minded about it. I became the first high school exchange student to the Soviet Union in 1969, the height of the Cold War, literally arriving from Haight-Ashbury into Moscow and causing a diplomatic incident by picketing the Ministry of Education in my miniskirt. I was also the last exchange student until the late 1980s. I went to the Chinese University of Hong Kong and sat at the border in '72, watching when Nixon and Kissinger opened China. I became a Sino-Sovietologist with an expertise in decision theory applied to arms races and the acquisition of nuclear weapons. This was at Yale, where I was one of 3 women admitted to the PhD my year, 4 years after women were admitted to Yale. Not a welcoming venue. But I was lucky enough to land a job doing exactly what I wanted to do: nuclear arms control negotiations in the now defunct US Arms Control and Disarmament Agency, what we called ACTA. And I will only note that I was the first female advisor on a US negotiating team on the INF talks working for Paul Nitze. My credentials notwithstanding, as a woman, I was not particularly welcomed there. Me Too moment. But I did find a welcoming home for the next several years on the START 1 delegation, where I became a highly valued asset to various ambassadors and ultimately ran a delegation of 30 members and then followed that job up as the head of policy planning at ACTA. But it was the mid-1990s that found me at State and obsessed with computers and taking engineering courses at night. I've been doing cyber so long, I still have a CompuServe email address. A coding savant I was not, But I was smart enough to recognize that the public policy implications of information technology were likely to be momentous. Then I had the privilege of coming to the National War College, class of '95, and began an enduring friendship with Fred Giesler as he tried to gain cybersecurity attention here. And as noted, I've lectured here annually ever since. But it was two pivotal events in 1998 that propelled me to invent the as yet non-existent field of international cyber diplomacy. The first was Dick Clark's issuance of Presidential Decision Directive 63 as a consequence of the Marsh Commission report. The second was Russia's proposal in the UN for a treaty to ban the development, deployment, and use by states of what they termed information weapons. PDD 63 was the first presidential document issued characterizing the need to organize the United States against cyber-enabled threats, and it posited the weakest link international connectivity problem. While mostly domestically focused, PDD 63 contained a solitary, outward-looking throwaway line to go make common cause with friendly and like-minded nations to address common vulnerabilities. Thus was born cyber capacity building. Russia's 1998 UN proposal garnered little attention outside of the State Department. I was the obvious choice for the negotiator. I was in the Political Military Bureau. I was a negotiator. I was the one person who knew anything about computers in the State Department at that point. This was the era of the Wang server. It was left to me to decide how to engage, as long as DOD told me, the answer I gave was no. Suffice to say that Russia's attack on Estonia in 2007 was a game changer. I was able to rally the interagency and our like-minded allies to mount a counter-narrative and proposal which has resulted, 20 years later, a series of pivotal and unprecedented global agreements establishing a standard of state-on-state conduct, a deterrent strategy that calls out bad behavior and, if we ever get it right, imposes consequences. You will have to take my elective on cyber diplomacy to learn the details, though. The establishment of cyber diplomacy as a line of foreign policy business has been really fraught because no senior leader in the State Department believed computers could be a threat to national security, nor required sophisticated diplomacy as a strategy of reducing risk to the nation. Instead, my career in the Political Military Bureau ended in 2007. This is before Estonia was attacked, when the then Assistant Secretary that told me that computers were not a national security threat, and why was I talking to the private sector anyway? I was the lone voice in the department for 15 years, even as the rest of the interagency was fully awake to the threat. I hate to say it, but I believe at this moment, attention to issues of war and peace in cyberspace are once again losing currency and attention to the new mantra of competitiveness and digital economy issues. But if I bring anything to the table, for better or for worse, I'm a truth teller, an unconventional problem solver, and an out-of-the-box thinker with the courage of my convictions, most often to the detriment of my career. But I wouldn't change a thing. Fast forward, and the war on Ukraine and the potential effects of emerging technology have created another tipping point. That Kennan wrote some of his best policy influencing work here should not go unmentioned, because we are at that tipping point again. We have spent the time since the original collapse of the Soviet Union on a diplomatic strategy of alternately embracing and entangling Russia in the rules-based order. But with Ukraine, we see that they have rejected it and turned the rules-based order on its ear, ignoring the constraints of LOAC and the UN Charter. What does that mean for strategy? Do we think we can push Russia back within its borders and call it a day? I don't think so. Do we simply dust off a physical containment policy? What cyber alliance will contain them? How will disruptive emerging tech affect our strategic deterrent in ways that men have never thought of yet? These are the things now on my mind, and I hope to think about them here at NDU. Thank you.